So we're here with the Public Choice Award nominees. We have Fabrizio, Michelino, Amelia and Mark. And does the shark have a name?
Jaws Dundee.
Okay.
Wait, you get the reference, right?
I do.
Good.
I do.
Certain generations, younger generations, not look at anyone, do not.
Why don't we start with you, Mark, and the Reef Stalked. How you came to be involved in the project first of all, and then we can talk about the score itself. But you worked with the director before, so I presume it was a kind of phone call and email.
No, I had not worked with Andrew Traucki before.
I thought you had. Okay, my mistake.
It's all right. Many mistakes were made in the making of the Reef Stalked. The first one was that his usual composer was not available, and he happens to be a good friend of mine. His name's Michelino. And he called me up and said, "Hey Mark, do you want to do another creature feature?" And I thought, film, no film. Yes, I do. I did a Zoom with Andrew, the director, and then the producer. Blah, blah, blah. Yes, I still have an Australian bank account and an ABN. Let's go. And that's how it happened.
So at that stage, had the film been shot?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So, yeah.
So how do you score a shark movie, bearing in mind that one of the greatest soundtracks of all time is a shark movie?
That was the first thing we spoke about. Andrew and I just said, look, we just can't even think about Jaws. Don't talk to me about John Williams. If I ever go close to that, tell me off. Let's do our own thing. And we did. So, yeah.
So tell me about that approach then.
We worked very, very hard to get the right textures and feel for underwater tension. There's a lot of tension in this film. Yes, there's the ubiquitous fast attacks, which you need when a shark is coming towards you. But the most interesting thing was he allowed me to do a lot of very melodic, lush scoring, because there's a whole side story to the film about sisterly bonding, and it actually starts with a horrendous scene of domestic violence. So with that sort of material, it was a lot deeper than just your average shark tale. So I went a lot deeper musically. So I didn't get to the sort of typical horror, fast attacking stuff until halfway through. And then I was very aware of the ubiquitous two-note John Williams Jaws theme, which of course, as we all know, is very similar to Dvorak's Symphony in E minor, right? Right? Did it. You know that, right? It's Dvorak.
I'm afraid I didn't.
I mean, I would not say this if John was here, but I teach film music as well, and I tell my students this. Anyway, long story short, because I've talked too long already, I apologize, colleagues. That theme's in 4/4 and in E minor. I went 7/8 and C sharp minor for my brutal, he called it tribal warfare, my main shark attack theme.
Cool.
Yeah.
Excellent, and thank you, Jaws Dundee. Amelia, Mr. Malcolm's List. It was a short film initially, wasn't it?
It was, yeah.
So how did you get involved in the project?
I think it was just, I think my agent put me forward for it, and then I think then it was a smaller list, and I met the director, and we went for a really lovely walk in Hyde Park, and we talked, and then I came up with a couple of, I think with a theme for her, and then we went from there.
So your music is in the film, isn't it? So you had to compose it in advance.
I did, yeah, which was actually great because it kind of got me in there quite early. So there was a big ballroom dance scene, and they needed the love theme to be written for that because they wanted them to dance to that. So I did that probably kind of 9 months before I did anything else. But it was good because it was kind of having that in the bag, having that feeling going into the job of, okay, well, we've got one theme and that's kind of bedded in already. It was a really nice starting point.
Mm. And were you there when they shot the ballroom scene with your music?
No, I wasn't. I was actually in Australia at the time, but I would have loved to have been there. But it was they shot during kind of COVID or just after, so I wouldn't have been allowed to be there anyway. It was really restricted at that time.
And in terms of the approach for the music, it's described as a contemporary classical score. So what instruments did you use? Were you inspired by anything in particular? What did the director, is Emily, isn't it?
Emma,
yeah. What did she say to you about what she wanted from the film?
I think she wanted the film to feel very classic and to be kind of bedded into something quite, traditional. But then she also was like, I don't want it to be boring and I want it to feel modern. So I think I tried to use the orchestra in quite a traditional way, but I tried to find more hooky kind of melodies and more catchy themes. And then I predominantly used woodwind as my kind of main colour, because I felt that was a good way of, it's just so expressive and it's got such a warmth, and I didn't want the film to feel too kind of buttoned up and icy, so I used woodwind in a kind of playful, fun way, I think.
So obviously it was a blank canvas when you came on board to compose. How often is that the case? Do you often get temp music?
I mean, it wasn't blank, there was temp. By the time I came back on, there was temp, yeah. I mean, they used my theme for the dance, but then, so no, it wasn't a blank slate, and I don't think I've ever had that experience. I think there's always been some form of temp there. And
what about you, Mark? Have you experienced that situation with temp music? If you teach
all too
films,
often,
yeah.
Yes.
Is it a good thing or a bad thing?
It's good in terms of having an exact reference for where your music should be and what the feeling of the music should be, but many composers encounter the phenomenon known as temp love, and we do not love it. The director loves the temp, and they might say, make it more like the temp, make it more like the temp. And that may have happened a little bit in the Reef Stalked, but we got through it.
Or they don't do that and they actually say, I'm not in love with the temp.
Which means they're in love with the temp. Yeah.
And then they keep going, but it just works so well. Just watch the temp again, it works really well. I'm like, I thought you didn't like the temp.
I mean, the last scene in the Reef Stalked was temped with Hans Zimmer, a cue from Interstellar. So that's why there's organ in there. All similarities ended there.
Okay, fine. Fabrizio, let's talk about your film, The Land of Dreams. So it's a score, but also, is it 10 songs?
10 songs plus an orchestral score I got asked to write. It's crazy enough, it's an Italian production from Leone Film Group, the kids of Sergio Leone, and it's their company, and they decided to do a musical in English about Italian immigrants in America in the 1920s. So part of the cast was native speakers in English, and part of the cast was Italian speaking in English. And there is, of course, the mob guy, there is the Italian immigrant who dreams of being a singer. And for me, it was very relatable because it was a part of your world moment in which I came to America searching for a place in the industry. So I was actually my character, Eva, and I wanted to make her relatable to both somebody like me, a man or a woman or whoever, you know. So like I wrote the lyrics of the songs, and then I had a lyric editor, friend of mine, an additional lyricist who could see from another point of view as well, so that also they would be in a proper English, in a real English, and not my broken English at times, because I can write very well and I can correct myself, but there's still need for somebody to tell me it's appropriate. It's not ABBA English that you forgive some stuff, you know. And then the full orchestral score. So I wrote these songs, those were the start. We wrote the songs first, which had many of the themes I used in the score in the end, and then the score was written during the pandemic, recorded during the pandemic, and it was a nightmare, but because we couldn't see each other. The director was in Rome. Even the dub, I did it from the sofa bed in my studio. It was a night for a week. Every night I did from midnight to 10 a.m. with Rome on the screen and listening to the dub. But it was an adventure.
I was going to say, was it a dream job, or because you're doing an orchestral score as well as songs?
It
or
was
it more of a challenge as a
It
result?
was both, I get to say, because if I don't take a job as a challenge, I get lazy. I don't want to be lazy. I think we need to strive for perfection in a way as much as we can. So it was a challenge for me, but also an honor, because who would give a non-Broadway person a musical to write, a full musical to write? And so I had fun in writing these songs, making them work into the score, and working with big band choruses, and having dancers. When I first saw the dailies from the set in Bulgaria, with people dancing on my song on a full camera movement, I was like, how lucky am I to live this dream? The movie is called The Land of Dreams. It was also a little bit my dream. And then when I went to write the score, I went more traditional me, like fantasy movie, and I knew I had a huge orchestra. We had to record during the pandemic in section, and that was a little pain in the neck to mix them together, you know, but I feel so grateful and happy.
So you say you're a non-Broadway guy, so why did they approach you then? What did you...
I had worked with this director. We had met through some friends, and we had done a mini musical of 4 songs in 2017. And I went on set in Rome. I conducted the singers on set, and they rebuilt everything. So we bonded. I like to write songs. I come from... my first job was assisting a very famous operatic composer whose name was Giancarlo Menotti, won 2 Pulitzer Prizes. I was 18, he was in his 90s. So I written an opera when I was 24. That was my background. And the evolution of the operatic medium for me is musical and of course cinematic art. So it felt quite natural. I also admired the great Broadway composer Rodgers and Hammerstein. I've been blessed to work with Richard Sherman on something recently, and of course Alan Menken, Lin-Manuel Miranda, and all the big shows. I'm not part of the culture, but I try to make it mine and read through my eyes and through my ears actually and soul. That is like, and he approached me because like the director is a kindred spirit, and we found each other. You find your collaborators that have the same kind of big dreams. Sometimes you win, sometimes you fail, but like at least keep dreaming, and the movie is all about that. We have one big dream and we need to pursue it.
And how long did you have to write the songs? Because we had the writers from Mrs. Maisel.
Yes.
And they had, I don't know if you heard, they had 7 songs in 3 weeks.
They're amazing, and they can do that. I was dealing with the director and the screenwriter all the time because I needed to fit in their story. I wrote the first demo was November 2018, and then I wrote all the songs from February to June of the following year. We recorded them in September, just before the pandemic, the September 2019 in Rome. So it was like February to June mostly.
So I was going to ask you, because you co-wrote a song that Sinead O'Connor sang, who sadly passed. What was that experience like working with Sinead?
It was wonderful. Like, she was so brilliant and kind and generous, and I wrote the song and didn't know who they were going to get to sing it, and then I remember the music supervisor called and said, Sinead's listened to the song and she's going to do it, and she just wants to have a conversation with you. And so I called her, we had a really lovely conversation. She was so kind. She had a couple of little tweaks that she wanted to do. I was like, absolutely. And yeah, she was just really gracious, and her vocal was incredible. So I feel really lucky to have crossed paths with her.
And Michelino, My Sailor, My Love. Yes. Tell me how you got involved in that project and what your approach to the music was.
Well, it was, I never worked with the director, Klaus Haro, a Finnish director. We have a common friend in Belgium, John Engel, who's a producer where I worked a couple of films for him. And I think he passed my name, but then he said to me that he checked like about 40 composers in Belgium, but it had to be a Belgian composer. And that's what he said, that he wanted to work with me because I'm very orchestral orientated with my music, and that's exactly the sound that he wanted to have. So it was already clear the way he contacted me, the way he approached me, that I already had an idea what direction he wanted to go. And but it was very early in stage, so he had just barely had the script ready, and he sent me over the script, but he asked me to send music as soon as possible, even if he didn't shot the film. So I started to compose on what I was reading, and some elements in the script was very inspiring me, and most of the music was also used in the film also. And he started to use it also as editing it also in the film. So I did some changes, but not so much.
So talking to some of the composers earlier, there's sort of two schools of thought. One, you'd love to be involved at script stage, and then the other one is fast and furious. So you've got a couple, so they can't change your, you've got an idea, you go with it. Have you been in those situations? Which one would you prefer?
It is nice when you get involved early. And in fact, my regular horror film collaborator, Chris Sun, the first film I did with him, I did read the script and I did a bunch of piano sketches, and I did 5, and one of them, he was like, oh, I like that. And it became the main theme for the trailer and the film itself. So sadly, that's the only time it's happened. So I say the earlier the better, if possible.
What about you, Amelia?
Just not always.
I always like the idea of being on early, and I think there are benefits for sure. But I think for me, it's really when you have the engagement. So whether some directors are really able to engage with music early on, and they like to, and some just aren't ready. So it's kind of I think you just want to make sure that you're having your kind of most creative peak at the point where you have full engagement from the filmmakers, rather than having to kind of do this through months and months and months. I remember someone saying to me that directors are like lighthouses, they have that single beam of light. So you want to make sure when it's on you that you're ready to go and you're in a good flow, So sometimes I can find that is harder when people just aren't quite ready, and you feel like you're maybe, sorry, could you maybe just listen to this idea that I had? And whereas when you're fully in that beam of light, everyone's listening, everyone's getting back to you, you can get real momentum going. So sometimes I do prefer just kind of being like, right, this is it, and we've got this amount of time, and let's do it.
And what about you two?
So I've had both experiences as well. The Land of Dreams, I wrote most of the themes before in the songs, and some stuff needed to be played on set. So we had some other themes and sequences. Everything changed in the editing, so I had to just rewrite. The themes stayed the way they were, but the timing changed, and so the structure of them changed. So it's been double the work. Interesting, beautiful. I set the tone for the movie, and I didn't have any temp score. They sent me the sequences, and I worked on them, and then we adapted to each other. Other time, I love doing a project in just a few weeks and having them responding right away and keep the momentum going, as you said, because that is at least you know that your day will have a certain configuration of and level of stress. It's not a back and forth stress, it's like a straightforward stress. And then I had a project in which I was, for instance, involved that was so slow and that lasted 10 years in the making, and that was stressful because I wanted to give notes to myself after a few years, to make everything consistent. So it depends on how fast the projects are, and what's the turnaround.
What was the project that lasted 10 years? Then?
It's a hand-drawn animated featurette by a Disney-Laden artist. It was amazing, but it took his time for his personal project. So.
Okay. And you, Michelino? In terms of, do you like the fast, or do you like to be involved?
Well, I like it to work on a script. I kind of find it always very inspiring, but the last film now I'm working on, I also did quite some music on the script, but at the end it didn't work at all, so I had to start all over when I got the film. It really didn't work. But it's okay, you just change your mindset and you start all over. But then on the image, of course.
So what is the shortest time you've ever had to turn out a score in?
5 weeks. Yeah. it was the same film where I came up with the main theme ahead of time with the script, but then everything else was condensed over one very cold Melbourne winter. I used to live in Australia, and 5 weeks. Which isn't too bad, is it?
Depends on how much music.
I mean,
Depends, yeah.
it was over an hour. So
and how crazy are they?
yeah, it was pretty nuts.
Okay, 5 weeks. Can you beat that?
It's not a competition.
I know it's not a competition, but it's a good question to ask.
I've been very comfortable actually. Usually, the only thing that happens to me is like when I'm working on multiple projects, they're all quiet, and then the first one picks up, and everybody wants to. So it's maybe like 8 weeks, but 3 things together that you have to separate the brain to bring the boat, to drive the boat in the harbor, you know? And
so I don't know how you know, Daniel Pemberton was saying this earlier, how you can juggle different scores at the same time. How do you, have you had that situation?
I haven't had that situation.
What about you?
I haven't had an overlap. I almost did, but no. But I believe many people have minions to help them with such things.
I separate myself. So we are actors. The good thing is like most of the projects that overlapped in my life are like different. So for me, when I get creative blocks, I try to stand up, go for a walk, get inspiration. It's easier not to get creative blocks when you have different stories to tell, because you can change from one thing to another one, you know, and work on a different story and then go back fresh, you know, and also like coming from the traditional Italian conservatory, when our final exam is a kind of like very fascist exam. They lock you in a room for 36 hours and you have to produce 3 orchestral variation. Then they free you for 1 day, and then they lock you for other 36 hours and you have to write a sonata. You have to be able to just like boom, 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 boom.
But do you change per day, or can you do one score in the morning, one score in the afternoon?
One in the morning. It depends on what I feel at the time, you know, and
gosh, and
well, I don't like to work on 2 projects at the same time. I really try to avoid that. I get confused, and I'm afraid that I start to mix things. So I try. I've never worked on 2 films at the same time, and hope I don't have to do that.
So Mark, you mentioned with a shark movie that Jaws looms large over it, but you also mentioned you do a lot of horror films. Is there a kind of horror, you know, do people say, give me a certain score, like a Carpenter thing, or you know, is there a Friday the 13th jab? Or
Thankfully, no. It's weird. I never set out to become a horror score composer, and I do far more than that. But it's odd. I moved to LA, and then once I was the Hollywood guy, the Aussies all wanted me to score their horror films. I feel like I'm sort of becoming the king of Australian horror scores. I'll take the title, sure. But Chris Sun, who I mentioned earlier, he does have certain films that he likes, and yes, he loves 80s horror. And when it comes to music, though, he's actually really open to me trying other things, and I've almost always managed to sneak in choir and or soprano to my horror scores with him. Did an exorcism film with him in 2021, The Possessed, and I'm pretty sure he would know The Omen and Jerry Goldsmith's famous score for that. His only Oscar, did you know that?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah.
And he got an Oscar nomination for a song called Ave Satani. So Chris didn't know it, but I was totally channeling Jerry for some evil choir. And I'm not sure he would have thought of that himself. And and he's a self-confessed bogan. You know what a bogan is? Like an Australian version of sort of a redneck, you know? He talks about music in a very different way, and we have to translate, right? And he would go blah, 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 I really like that hymn music, mate. And so that was my fully fledged choir. One of the singers was Holly Cedillos, who I believe you've worked
fantastic.
with. Yeah.
She's brilliant.
So, a long time ago, I was a sweet, angelic chorister, would you believe? So I had 5 years of free training in choral music, and I'm always trying to slip it into these horror scores. So I try to bring some class to it, rather than just follow the cliches and the tropes.
I clicked on a 70s playlist on Spotify yesterday, and it had, Led Zeppelin, Supertramp, and
The Omen.
The Omen.
Yes.
Yeah. Which is an amazing song.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, brilliant. He should have won more Oscars there.
He should have.
Yes. Your students, who are their favourite composers?
It depends which students. I have 2 classes sort of scattered throughout the year. At the moment, I'm teaching film music history at Cal State University, Northridge, and we're just coming up to the 70s, and when I get back, it's going to be Horror Week. So I have so many goodies for them. So those students, I'm not sure if they have a favourite yet, because we've only got to the 70s. They were pretty excited about Ennio Morricone.
Okay.
But I also teach at UCLA Extension, film scoring on a budget, which I'm an expert on. And funnily enough, the first question I asked them in the first class is, who is your favourite composer? Half of them said John Williams. One Mexican-American student said Gustavo Santaolalla. Someone else said Clint Mansell, who I love, and John Powell. There was no Hans. I'm not dissing Hans though. I would never.
The issue of AI, so the writers have been on strike because of AI, the actors are on strike because of AI. I spoke to a British composer earlier this year, and he was very concerned about it because he thought that he cut his teeth in kind of British television doing kind of daytime stuff, and he says that is all going to be AI from now on. So young composers aren't going to get the chance. I just wondered whether you have thoughts about AI in music and how it's going to affect
my definite thought, which is you teach film scoring.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think you teach that this is the way to do film scoring.
No.
There are film scoring schools around the world that are teaching the way to score a movie. There's no way to score a movie. There is your way to score a movie. Ennio Morricone would have never existed, nor Danny Elfman, nor anybody else. Sitting here, I think that all of us, we try to be ourselves at the maximum. If there is like, how do you say, a consolidated form in which you write with 4 chords, with ostinatos, etc., and that's all that. That's replicable. Machines can create a bombastic trailer piece of music in 1 second, even better than anybody else. But can recreate the soul? No. They can make a copy of something we are doing with melodies because they think to generate something that's pleasant. But I think that the most important thing is that we, to not be in fear of AI, we need to be ourselves. We need to write our own things and teach the value of that. I'm not talking about me, but they are gourmet food. We are not fast food, gourmet food. And gourmet restaurants, they still work, even when fast food come out. Good restaurants still sell their food. I think this is my opinion. Yes, of course, I have my concerns sometimes because there is not only us, but there is the decision makers. There are the decision makers who think, okay, what's cheaper? They don't think what's better usually. But we need to unite and calmly, politely, and patiently say we're better because of this. We can bring the art form, because this is an art form, to the next level. And live music is a great thing, AI in live music wouldn't work that well, at a concert.
Mm.
Well, there's a nice joke. They say, we as a composer, we have to understand the director when he asks you, I want this, but it means that. I want blue, but it means red. So as an AI to understand what he wants, I think it's not going to be easy. I'm not afraid of that. It's part of it. I think we will deal with that. We have to learn to deal with that. Maybe we will start to use it also. I don't know. in plugins or in our devices that we use. But I think the art is always the art, and it will remain art.
You too? Thoughts, Mark, Amelia?
I have many thoughts, but Amelia first.
I'm not sure. I mean, I agree with what you both just said, and I'm not essentially worried that I do think that there is something, you know, maybe this is very naive of me, that is the human connection that can't really be replicated. And I guess I'm hopeful that maybe there might be a way of AI being a tool for composers and being of use, and you know, there might be a world where, like we say, sometimes it's really hard to communicate with directors and you're having to get someone in to record something and mock something up, and actually you could just be like, AI, do me a bluegrass version of da-da-da, or you know, give me a sample of this and let's just do it, and you can have it instantly there for somebody to hear and go, that, you know. So, and I do think maybe people with bigger teams, maybe some of that will start to be AI people, AI writing, and
Yeah.
But I'm hopeful that it won't ultimately change our role and our art too much.
Mark, you seem to have...
So, there's a film that's just been released, and I can't remember the name, but Hans actually did the score. Gareth Edwards was the director.
The creator.
So Gareth actually tried to use AI to score that film that was written about recently. He just sort of did it as a joke. And he tried to get AI to write the score in the style of Hans Zimmer. Then he realized it was maybe 6 out of 10 and he needed 11 out of 10, so he hired Hans. So I think that sort of summarizes what we're all saying here, in that unless you're training AI to compose like you as a shortcut for yourself somehow, rather than have an assistant do something, maybe. So I guess potentially assistants should be more worried than lead composers. And as Fabrizio said, yes, part of the year I'm teaching a film scoring course, and I'm not teaching my students how to write like other composers. In fact, if they do, I say to them, you're clearly a fan of this composer and you sound like them, I want you to sound like you. So until AI can train itself to sound like nobody else, I don't think we've got anything to worry about. Right? I hope those aren't famous last words.
Yeah.
I mean, look, I write music outside of film music. I like to write choir music. And my point of difference there, I did a collaboration with the LA Choral Lab earlier this year. I was in a concert with them. They performed 3 of my choir pieces, 2 of which were for choir and electric guitar, and I performed with them. I can't see AI coming up with anything like that. So as long as we keep innovating and, you know, sounding like ourselves, I think we're okay. Right?
Yeah. Yes, the cheaper, but the better, but rather than cheaper, I think is the point to take away. What are you working on now and next?
So just completed. I call them featurette because at 30 minutes with 26 minutes of music, I don't think it's a short. I just finished Mushka, the animated project that took 10 years, and together with the song and a theme by Richard Sherman of Mary Poppins fame, and another live-action featurette that's opening at AFI Fest at the end of the month. And I'm starting a thriller next month, and doing some animation, and that's it for now.
And who's the thriller for?
I cannot say.
Okay.
I'm about to finish. We'll have a scoring in 2 weeks. It's an American road movie. It's a Dutch director, Jan Willem Ewijk. Very drama film, but I tried to. But I've come up with this story where I wrote the music before, based on the script that I've started all over because it didn't work, and I really look forward to the scoring because it's a wonderful film. It's heavy, but it's beautiful.
Cool. Amelia?
I just finished a film called Young Women in the Sea, which is for Jerry Bruckheimer produced it for Disney. And
the Daisy Ridley thing.
Yes,
yeah.
Exactly. So it's about the first woman to swim the channel. in 1926. So yeah, it's an amazing story. But I'm not sure. There's no release date yet, so sometime next year. Joachim Ronning, so he's Norwegian director. Yeah, he's
cool.
great.
And Mark and Jules Dundee, what are you two working on next?
Well, funnily enough, and it was delayed, but I hope I'm starting soon, I'm doing yet another Australian horror film with Chris Sun. I can't say the title yet, but I know it's a werewolf film. So I'm doing all the beasts. I've done a shark film. I did a film with him about a giant killer pig called Boar, as you do. So werewolf is coming up, but I'm also doing a very personal drama film. I've got a horrible feeling they're going to end up happening at the same time early next year. So I'll be getting tips from you, Fabrizio.
Don't sleep.
So I don't know the title of that yet, but I know it's a story about a young man who studies abroad in Japan for a year, and it's all to do with his father. It'll be very melodic and piano-based, unlike my horror scores. So I'm looking forward to that.
Cool. Well, I'm looking forward to an Australian werewolf movie.
Aren't we all?
Well, listen, thank you very much, Mark, Amelia, Fabrizio and Michelino. Good luck tonight, and thank you for chatting today.
I don't care who wins. You're all awesome, so I'll just applaud whoever.
This guy to win.
Jaws will win.